Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts, and today I'm back with this absolutely gorgeous Arocs 4151 tipper truck. I did an unboxing a few weeks ago and it's time to build it. But before I do that, I had to point out my new hat and my new shirt and my new coffee cup and some of those things that my wife has been working hard to up my game on these things. So here we go. You can buy these coffee cups and shirts and that kind of stuff on a website we have set up, and there's probably links below this video, but also in the video description you can go right to it. The hats you can buy on my normal Hobbyconcepts.net website. So anyway, but great Father's Day gift, by the way. So the 4151 tipper truck, 2 videos. Today I'm going to build it up to this point, which is the cab. I'm going to show how to fit the Tamiya MFC03 into it and still have a dash, which Tamiya says you can't do, but you can, and it looks a lot better that way. And a couple other little tips on extra lighting and a few things like that. So today I'm going to focus mainly on those optional things, not a step-by-step build. The next part on the dump bed, we'll actually go through it a little more step-by-step because that's new. So anyway, let's get started. Just a quick recap as I get started on this tipper truck. I did do an unboxing video you can watch. So we're going to build this Tamiya Arocs 4151 8x4 tipper truck. I'll be using a modified FlySky radio. I'll be using Tamiya's electric actuator set, which allows remote control of the dump bed, and Tamiya's Euro style MFC03 sound and lights and vibration unit. And along in this video, halfway through, I'm going to do just a video on the FlySky radio with the MFC03 on how to program it and use it. So we'll get these unboxed and get going on them. Well, as you can see, I've got a little bit of work done here on these frames. I took the servos and prepped those just according to the instructions, and then I prepped each side frame. Nothing unusual about these frames. They have a lot of holes in them, except for 2 sets of front suspension mounts, and so I'm not going to show putting that together. It's basically pretty normal. The next step includes putting some of the cross members in and putting the frames together. And I skipped ahead a couple steps just to get rid of some loose parts and built all these push rods. Typical Tamiya full-size drawings here of the length, which is really nice. One note is this long rod was kind of hard to find. Well, it was taped in the package with these aluminum frames here, and it was down inside. It took me a while to figure out where it was. The other thing is the transmission shift shaft was packed in here. So if you're looking for parts, sometimes with this kit you might have to look a little bit. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put these frames together, install the servos, and we'll see how that all looks. Again, everything went together just like the instructions showed. This is that really long steering rod, and I like to test as I go. So you can see the steering links. They've moved the steering way back, the steering servo way back. Probably be covered by a box or something. So we'll continue on from here. Right now it's the front suspension, and that's the same as every other Tamiya truck except doubled. I just thought I'd show these fuel tank parts since they're new parts. They mount together like this. This plate mounts up underneath the bottom, and then this becomes a cover for the servo. So I'm going to go ahead and put those together, but I'm going to also paint them. So I'll do that while I work on the suspension. Well, you can see here I've got the chassis all put together. Very straightforward. And if you want to see detailed building, just go to my Volvo FH16 Globetrotter build, because it builds exactly the same, except maybe for the servo mount location. So I've got everything put together and adjusted on the chassis. And I know I blew through that pretty fast and didn't show the construction, because what I really want to show are the things that make this dump truck different than the other Tamiya trucks, and that's kind of starting now. So before I get started, I've identified these parts as needing to be painted with semi-flat black, and there is a lot of them. So I'm going to go ahead and paint all these so they can be drying. Now some of these parts, like these smaller parts, I'll airbrush them right on the trees, and some of the parts like these fenders, I will cut them off and clean them up before I get Winston's hairs off of them, before I paint them. So I'm going to go ahead and paint those, and then I'll have those ready to take apart and put on, and then we'll get moving on the real construction of this truck. Now we're starting to get into some of the parts on this truck that are a lot different than the other trucks. So the first one are these tail lamp assemblies. Now I just put this together, and I put in the little spacers so all the LEDs are 3mm. Now the MFC03 comes with 5mm tail light bulbs and turn signal bulbs. The backup lights are 3mm, but all the strings are too short. Okay, Tamiya. So what they are telling you here in the instructions is you have to buy these optional strings that are longer and have the smaller size LEDs. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to just solder my own LEDs in. And the other thing is they only give you 2 tail light bulbs, but there's 2 tail lights on this truck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this string here, which has got our tail lights and 2 bulbs, and I'm going to clip it off, and I'm going to solder in new LEDs, which will also extend the length, and I'm going to put 4 3mm LEDs so I can light up all the spaces. On these, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to solder in a 3mm LED with a longer lead, so it'll be long enough. Now the backup lights are probably these, and they're already 3mm LEDs, which fit in here fine, so I don't need to change the LEDs, but I do need to lengthen it. So what I'll do there is just clip the wiring and extend it with a longer piece of wire. So I'm going to go ahead and solder those up, and then install the LEDs in here, and that way I can get my tail end of my truck put together. In order to lengthen out these strings, I've got, here's what I need. I've got 4 3mm LEDs and 2 3mm amber LEDs, and then I've got a couple pieces of wire to extend the backup lights. So the backup lights are easy. I'm just going to clip this, and I'll solder in these lengths of wire to make them longer. The turn signals, again, pretty simple. I'm just going to clip off the 5mm LED, and I'm going to solder on these 3mm LEDs, which have a nice length of wire on them already, so they do the same thing to extend. On the tail lights, I'm just going to clip off the LEDs, and I will solder on the 4 LEDs, so I'll be able to fill up all the holes. So I'm going to go ahead and solder all that together. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. So here's my extended string. This is the tail lights, and you can see I just tapped in the negatives and positives, so I have 4 bulbs. The turn signals are pretty simple, just 1 bulb with extended wires, and then of course the tail lights I just soldered in a extension, or they're the backup lights. So now these are ready to install, so I'll go ahead and install them in the little brackets, and then I'll plug them into the MFC and test them. So I've got all my lights mounted in these assemblies, and I'm big on testing. I test all along the way because I hate to wire everything up and then find out afterwards it doesn't work. So we'll take a look here at the turn signals now. We move this down and then turn it. So you can see our turn signals are working fine. For the emergency flashers, dual rate switch down, and then this stick up turns on our emergency flashers. Okay, we'll turn on the lights. There's our tail lights. Now we added an extra bulb, so we have 4 tail light bulbs instead of 2 like the normal MFC, because we added those lights, and that looks a lot better. And then of course when you have a brake light, you can see they go brighter. Or if you have the lights off, we have the brake lights, and then we have our backup lights. Okay, so those all work. I can go ahead and get these installed on the back of the truck. Well, I've got the rear lights mounted. This rear bumper just fits over here. It's held on with a couple of screws. And then there's a couple of small screws that keep it from rotating up and down. So I'll go ahead and put that on, and then some of the forward bits get mounted. The little side step here mounts the MFC control, and it's got a little magnet down inside here so that when the door closes, there's a screw right here, and the door magnet will hold it. This mounts up underneath here. This piece of photo etch goes on top, and then this covers up the whole MFC control panel. So this has to mount on the chassis first, and then all this goes together. So I will get all this put together and mounted, and I also painted up this fuel tank servo cover and put some chrome tape on it for the stripes, and I'll get that mounted. As I move along on the chassis, I mounted the little side pieces here. I've got the MFC control panel in, and the next job is to mount this this cab floor. I mounted the fenders on it. You can see here the color I've selected is going to be a lime green, and this is going to mount down here like that. So the next step, after I get that mounted, is mounting the MFC, which, if you follow the directions, the MFC mounts like this, but then you can, the speaker mounts like this, hangs down into the passenger compartment, which is just unacceptable to me. So I'm going to do some playing with this. I'm going to go ahead and mount all this, do some playing with it, and see how I can mount the MFC in here so I can still get at least the dash and probably some kind of interior in there, and get this speaker hidden out of the way. So I'll finish putting those chassis pieces together, and then I'm going to work on that. One of the awesome things on this truck, and it's just such a simple, awesome thing, is they have cut slots in the frame to run tie wraps through for the wiring. So you can see that I've got a little tie wrap right here. I've got another slot right here. So there's slots all the way up just to hold the wiring. I would love for them to do that on every kit. They're all in different places all along the chassis, and then you can just have something to tie wrap onto instead of having to go all the way around the frame or something else. So right now I'm working on just cleaning up this wiring. I'm going to pull it up to the front. And then they have, right now they want you to just run these lights out here and let them hang, because you can't, they mount to the fenders, but you can't put the fenders on until after you have the dump bed on. So I'm going to go ahead and do like they suggest and just run these out, run everything up, and bundle up the wiring. So the chassis up to this point, I pulled the wiring up. I used spiral wrap. These are my marker lights that we'll be mounting out later. So those are in place. And then I'm going to pull these wires up through here. So they'll be coming out here. Now the one thing I haven't decided is whether to mount the MFC like this or like this. I really want to be able to use this dash. They have a beautiful dash in this kit. But with this mounted in the stock location, you can't. Now, I mounted this without the spacers, so it's lower. I think I can fit this so it misses this bolt on the transmission, or I can just cut that bolt off and possibly get this mounted in the cab, because I'd like to light it up too. So I really am not going to know until I mount the cab, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of frame that up and mount the cab just so I can see where to mount the MFC. What I've done here is mounted the body on its normal mounting position, and you can see I put the dash in without the little lower part on it, just so I could see how the MFC fits. And I have discovered that if I leave the spacers out of here and saw this off, that I'll be able to mount the MFC right here, and the dash will fit. Now what I plan on doing then is building a top for this with the top half of a driver figure and maybe the top half of the seat on top of that. So when you look in the windows, you'll see the driver figure and the dash, because you really need the dash. Otherwise you need to black out the windows. So that's how I'm going to do that. Now, cutting this off, this transmission bolt, this bolt just holds the two transmission halves together up high, but the transmission halves don't serve any structural purpose. They're only there just to cover the gears so your fingers don't get caught in them and to keep grease from spitting out. So cutting off that will have no effect. I may just put a little glue on this, but that'll allow me to use this lower deck height and get that to sit in there level. Everything should go together, and I should have a nice dash and a driver figure. Excellent. There's my MFC installed, and I tied up the wiring, but not perfectly, because I still have to plug in the tilt actuator for the bed, which plugs into the second slot down. And then of course all the cab wiring needs to plug in, but I'll do a separate harness for that. I verified that my dash fits and the cab closes just fine, and there's no latch installed yet. So the MFC works perfect there. I can still have a dash. I'm going to build a little platform that covers this, and then put like the top half of the seat and maybe a driver figure on there. And I'll cover this MFC 03 sticker with a carbon fiber sticker just to kind of hide it. I want to leave those slots open. So that'll really clean up the inside of the cab, hide the MFC. I still have my dash. And I'm going to take, this is an extra light string that's left over. So I'm going to take and snip this and add 2 blue LEDs, and then I'll light up the dash with blue LEDs and just plug it into the MFC. So I'll even have a lighted dash. You can see how the battery compartment fit. This truck is really awesome. It's going together great. The other thing I'm worried about is the speaker, which they show mounting basically from the bottom up, which is horrible, because not only would it not sound good just playing right into this cover, but it hangs down into the driver's compartment. So I'm going to use a Beer speaker, which as you can see is a ton smaller than the Tamiya speaker, and I'm going to mount it so it's like this, and it will fit underneath the roof section and barely show inside the cab. So that'll hide my speaker. And this speaker works exactly the same. I can just unsolder the wires from here and solder them onto the speaker. So that gives me a really nice clean interior with the MFC 03.
So I've got some details done. I've got the body painted. I painted the black trim, and I did install a couple of lights in the dash, cut out the light holes and painted it. I'll go ahead and do the decals. The speaker, I built this little plastic plate that spaces the speaker up just a tiny bit, and the speaker will mount like this, and it clears the roof piece just fine, and it doesn't hang down hardly at all into the body, so when you're looking in you really won't see it. It does not hang down below the level of the windows at all, so that really is a good spot to hide that little speaker. So I'll go ahead and assemble the body details, get this mounted, and the dash mounted, and I think I can get this body put on. Well, I have all the little details on the body. You can see the dash in here. I'll take a look inside. Speaker mounted up there, dash mounted in. I brought all the wiring down the front corner, so it'll be right up here when the body's on, at the latch mechanism and the air intake. So it's ready to go ahead and mount. I got a couple little details to put on at the very end, but I'm going to go ahead and mount this up, and then I can work on the front bumper and the bed. As I continue along, man, this kit is kicking my little modeling booty. There are so many parts. It's taken me a lot longer than I thought, so sorry I haven't had this video up quicker. A couple things. On this front end, there's two little marks here and here. The instructions tell you to drill out if you want to use these headlight grill covers. Now, I've decided I don't want to use them, so I'm not going to drill those holes out. But that's kind of an optional thing. There's quite a few little details on this truck you can decide. The other thing is this, I don't know, Nerf bar, sway bar, whatever it is, mounts in here like this and sticks out in the front. It glues in from the back. I'm going to leave it off for now. I can always add it at the very end, but it kind of gets in the way of putting the screws in to hold the front clip on, and also it looks like it's something that could break off. So those two pieces I'm just going to save for potential use in the future, and then these step units just glue in the backside like this. My headlights, I've already installed the LEDs in them, just mount in from the backside like this, but there's a lens that goes in there first, so I'm going to go ahead and put the lens in, put those in, glue these on, and then this whole assembly goes on in one piece, bolts on in one piece to the bumper. Now also on the chassis, just a couple little details, there are some fenders that mount here and on the back end, here and here, but I have not installed those yet because in the instructions for the motorized tipper mechanism they tell you to take those off. So I'm going to go ahead and install that, and I'll probably do that in part 2, but I'm not going to put the fenders on until after I get that tipper mechanism all put together. So I'll go ahead and finish up this front body right now. As I finish up this front grille to install it, one of the things to me it tells you to do in the instructions is to glue on these front corner steps. And I hate to glue these on because, well, for several reasons. One, they aren't very strong when you glue them on, and two, you can see this light bucket in here. If you wanted to take it off later and this was glued on, it would be very difficult. So what I've done is what I do on a lot of the kits is I've drilled holes through the plastic with a little matching hole on the inside here, and then I hold it together with these self-tapping screws, and the kit's got some extra ones. These are MA15 in the kit, and that makes a really nice installation. I don't think these screw heads look bad at all. It's super strong, way stronger than gluing, and you can take it apart later. So I do this a lot of times on like grand haulers. I screw on the visors instead of gluing. On these side fenders here,
I use double sticky tape to put those on instead of gluing, which means I could take them apart later if I needed to, and if they're not strong enough, I could always drill through and put a little screw in there. But those don't take the beating that these front corners do. So I'll go ahead and finish screwing that on, and I can go ahead and mount this and then plug it into the MFC along with the cab lights, and that should pretty much get the chassis done. Well, you can see that pretty well finishes up my my cab and chassis. Cab works nicely. MFC fits in there good. The dash comes down. You can see the truck's looking pretty good. There's a bunch of lights hanging underneath here because they mount into the fenders. But overall, looks pretty good. Let's fire it up here. We'll turn on the radio and turn on the MFC here. You hear the clicking, so we can fire up the engine. Now, if you pull it down quickly, you just get that start sound. If you hold it, you get the complete engine. Now, our steering works fine. To get steering or turn signals, you have to pull down first and then steer. You can see the turn signal there. Horn. Now, cool thing with the MFC03, you flip this down, move this over, flip it up, different horn sound. So 2 different horns. We'll flip this down. We got our emergency flashers here. Turn those off. Then we have our lights. So the first row of lighting are these upper search lights. And then the second one is going to be our running lights, and that also turns on the dash lights inside. I don't know. Let's see if we can take a look at those. I'm actually pretty happy with how that turned out. Yeah, you can see the dash in there. And yes, the MFC03 is in there, the dash is in there, and I think maybe in the next video I can even get a seat and driver in there. We'll see about that. And then, of course, the next level of lighting would be our headlights and tail lights and everything, and then back off again. So that works super good, just like it's supposed to. A couple other features, of course, obviously you can drive it. Now, I've got a jumper in J12 on the MFC, and I'm going to talk about that in my MFC03 video that'll be coming up pretty soon. I may pull it because I just think it makes this thing a little bit too fast, but I'll discuss that in the future. And then, of course, I can shut my engine off. There we go. So that turned out pretty good. Well, that takes us up through step G, and step G is the bed. Now, the bed is a lot different than anything I've done on a Tamiya truck before. So in part 2, I'm going to build the bed and the bed lift kit and get that put on, and I'll do a lot more step-by-step building on that one. This one, I just wanted to hit some of the highlights, how to install the MFC03 and the dash, how to light the dash, some of the little detail things I did. I think this truck is absolutely beautiful. I am super happy with it. I built a lot of Tamiya trucks, and I'll tell you, this is one of my favorites. I just think it looks stunning. I like everything about it. Lots of little parts. It takes forever to build it, but I think it really turned out good so far. I think it will really look nice with the dump bed on it. So there we go. We'll call this part 1. As always, I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe so you can see the second part of this video and upcoming videos on the MFC03 too. And I'm also going to do a video on the MFC03 and the MFC01 comparison, because I get that question all the time. What's the difference? How do they sound different? So I'm going to have 2 trucks completely finished, and I'll do a side-by-side with those. So anyway, there we go with part 1 of that 4151 Arocs build. And yeah, give me a thumbs up. We'll see you next time.